Hey guys, welcome back to Martin's Daughter. Today I have the amazing, the fierce, the most powerful mama bear that I know on the show. And what I wanted to do was to talk about um, the truth about SEL. She has done so much research, so much, and she has so much evidence so that you can no longer put your head in the sand and say it's not here after you talk to my guest, Lisa Logan of Parents of Patriots. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad to just dive into this. I've known Lisa for about a year now, and we've actually been able to do some speaking things together. She is just seriously a powerhouse. She has exposed so many things that they can be, it can be hard to hear. It can be hard to hear. You kind of want to close your eyes, turn your head, and say, "Mm-mm, not in my home, not in my district. It's not happening." But she proves that it is. So, Lisa, how did you get started in all of this?
It's kind of interesting. I'm just a regular parent like anyone else. And I got started because I started going to board meetings. I was concerned that when a lot of kids were in school 5 days a week. The ones at my kids' school was only going to school 2 days a week during the whole COVID situation. So I just started going to board meetings and making public comments. And I saw when I went to my kids' local public school district meeting that they had on their agenda that they were going to be implementing a social emotional learning program called Second Step. And like any curious person, I just went to their website and I was like, this is curious. They have like an anti-bias and anti-racial resources page. And they said on there that they subscribe to Castle's transformative SEL definition. And then I looked up that. And then it just kind of led me down this rabbit hole of information. And once I figured out what they were trying to do with social emotional learning, I knew I had to start speaking out against it.
So social and emotional learning, that sounds wonderful. Everybody wants their child to be compassionate. Everybody wants their child to have social skills, especially in today's day and age where it's come home and jump on a computer and not even talk to other people. Never, back in the day, we would see kids outside in parks, and now parks are pretty much empty, except for the little tiny ones.
Right.
So what exactly is social and emotional learning?
So it's the process by which individuals develop skills such as self-management, self-regulation, decision-making. It sounds really, really amazing, and that's what makes it the perfect Trojan horse. And while we want our kids to develop healthy relationships, and that's really what it's billed as. It's billed as a mental health program to teach kids how to interact and be positive in their relationships. What they've done with it is they kind of slipped it in under that guise and then kind of flipped the switch. Now in 2020, Castle changed their definition of what social emotional learning is to be transformative social emotional learning, which is SEL done through an equity and racial lens.
And equity, what exactly does that mean?
It's kind of become a dirty word, and in a sense, it's been hijacked by people. It used to mean that we provide kids equal opportunity to learn, to do anything. Now they've co-opted it to mean equal outcomes. So if there is any unequal outcomes, and they like to disaggregate this information by race and gender. And then if there's any kind of discrepancy in outcome, they immediately say, oh, that's just evidence of racism.
And what is a discrepancy in outcome? Does that mean like if one child gets an A and one child gets an F? Is it
Going in that direction.
okay?
I mean, that's like a whole other thing. I mean, the takeover of how they're doing accountability in schools is like a whole extra conversation besides SEL, but they really are going in that direction. This is why our state right now is having these meetings to completely shift our system from a merit-based grades accountability system to then we're doing a competency-based system, really heavily focused on the soft SEL skills being the main thing they're focusing on, and the academic skills being secondary to that.
So I've heard that SEL soft skills can lean kind of biased politically. Is that true?
Yes, and they do it through interesting ways, right? They manipulate the definition of empathy and perspective taking. And it used to be that you could disagree with somebody and
Mhm.
it'd be okay, right? I mean, it doesn't give you a license if you disagree with somebody to be unkind to them. Um, to point at them or to be mean. But what they have now done is and we've been proven this through the second step K-5, is they start out saying, oh yeah, it's just recognizing that people have different points of view than you, and that's okay. And then they manipulate that definition to then mean you have to accept and acknowledge what their truth is. And so if their truth is, for instance, that they identify as a different gender, you have to accept that and use their pronouns. And it's really become this way for them to force social justice on kids for these particular ideologies and causes through the lens of being kind.
Right. And it seems to me that those causes oftentimes are BLM social justice. And I am doing the quotation marks here because social justice doesn't look anything like actual justice. People are able to do things and get away with things based solely on the color of their skin or their gender. There was one trans person who I believe that they actually murdered someone or attempted murder, and they felt that it was okay because the person was transphobic. So there's all sorts of it seems to me like it's a manipulation of our very youngest and most vulnerable. How early does this start? I mean, do parents in elementary school need to worry, or is this more like about the high school ages where they already have some idea of critical thinking?
Well, I think it does start early, but it was interesting. And when I went through the K-5 in second step and I saw this change, I think it really started to see things shift around grades 3 or 4. Um, so, it starts out kind of nice. And unless you're looking at it on a timeline, right, unless you're really diving into it with the idea of looking to see if that changes, I could see how other people who are teaching kids this material are like, you're crazy, it's totally a great program, and they're just it's working great for our classes, because they don't see what happens in the other grades and how it's being manipulated. So yes, I would say if you have an elementary student, I would be worried. And some of the other stuff that we've seen come through, so when we found out that second step was being taught, Stacey and I went in and we actually reviewed the whole 8th grade curriculum. Another mom, Stacey Clay, and spent a whole over 30 hours of time in the district office, because this is copyrighted material. They won't let you just view it from the comfort of your home. So we would go in and we would take notes and we would do all these things. And the 8th grade is like the culmination of it all, right? It's kind of where you really see it's not as covert. It's really in your face. There was a slide that had, stand up and, choose a disruption strategy, and they had the raised fists. And of course, the one in the middle was a black line. And it's all, that symbolism of Black Lives Matter and the Black Power movement. It's funny. These younger grade ones are it's manipulative. It's secretive, and you can tell they're purposely trying to kind of to slowly chip away at these kids and get them to the point where in 8th grade they're wanting to choose a disruption strategy.
Well, it's really interesting because we do go Noodles at school when it's raining or you can't go outside to play. And we were watching a Go Noodle, and it was about being brave. And it was like, I can climb a tree. I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And mixed in with all of it is, I can stand up for social justice with the fist. And I'm watching my kiddos, and half the class's little fists go up in the air and they have no idea what they're doing. And this is at a school that stands against this.
Right.
So another thing that they easily put into school is like yoga and relaxation and self-awareness at these little tiny ages. And I was realizing yesterday, because we were in testing week, and some of the Go Noodles were talking about if you have anxiety, and I'm thinking, they can't even spell that word. They don't even know what it is until you put it in their faces. And it seems to me what I've seen of social and emotional learning is that it's pretty much constantly in their faces.
Right. Well, and they're getting kids to hyper focus on their emotions, right? That's never good for anybody. There's a school board member in our school district, and I remember we were talking about social emotional learning and what we were going to do a second step. And while she was up there making her board comments, she was saying her grandson came home from school, and he's like, "Grandma, do I have anything to be sad about?" And she's like, "Well, why do you ask?" And he goes, "Well, I did this thing called social emotional learning in school, And they kept asking me, where do you like? They had these circle times, where kids would open up and be vulnerable. That's a whole nother can of worms, that is awful that they're doing that with kids. It's like practicing psychology without a license. But they asked the kids, share something that you're sad about. The kid was like, I'm not sad about anything. I mean, and this board member was like, this kid's like the happiest kid in the world. He has everything he'd ever wanted. He's got friends. He's got a loving family. But they kept pushing him. Are you sure? Isn't there anything you've ever been sad about? And it's like they're trying to get him to focus on these negative emotions instead of having them focus out. And because when you get kids to hyper focus on themselves, they're going to be caught up in their minds, in their own little world, and not be able to see the good that's around them.
It's sort of like raising narcissists, like
Mm-hmm.
intentionally. And I also think that it is manufactured mental illness.
Yes.
I had a state representative stop by my house and ask for my vote and tell me that what parents are worried about is whether or not their kids can do math, read, and are they going to kill themselves? I don't think so.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I see a lot of kids, again, work in a school, have a teenager. I see a lot of a young teenager. In fact, what really bothers me that this is 8th grade, because everything, I feel it's very personal, because that's the age of my son. He doesn't know half this stuff. And one of the things that's really hard is realizing in the last 2 years that he has to know this stuff. He has to be able to identify it, which is a terrible thing because he should be carefree,
Mm-hmm.
and they should be carefree and focused on achieving and having the best possible lives that they can have. And yet instead, they are so focused on themselves that they're becoming weaker and weaker, and intellectually the same, because they're being told, nothing really matters as much as how you feel.
And honestly, if you really want to work on the health, the mental, emotional health of our kids, stop the social media with the kids. I mean, this is honestly what is turning them into narcissistic, sad, depressed kids. It's like there's so much junk they see on social media. My kids aren't allowed to have it. Even the ones that have phones, they're not allowed to have social media, and it's because it will bring them down. And it, just like all this other stuff in school, it's introducing them to concepts they might not know about, and they may then search on the internet. The whole furry thing, the whole, it's like what they're seeing in school is what they're then looking at, like, wow, this world's kind of crazy. And like you're saying, they're having to learn this stuff because it's in their face all day long.
Right. Right. And under the name of empathy, I find that interesting, though, that you said stay off of social media, because, like I said, I do kind of know a little bit about SEL. And the people who are the founders, who are the people pushing these programs.
Well, Bill and Melinda Gates, Mark Zuckerberg. And that's the other thing, I cover a lot in my material, on Parents of Patriots on my YouTube channel. Again, is following the money and what their motivations are, and a lot of it's data collection. Interestingly enough, Zuckerberg, right, during the 2012 and 2016 elections, it was revealed in the news that he partnered with a company called Cambridge Analytica, and they basically psychoanalyzed Facebook users and then use that information to target ads to them to influence their vote in the election. And it makes you wonder, what are they using this social emotional learning data for in this case to target our kids with?
Right. And I think we know. I mean, it's there very clearly. We have people in Utah we have principals in Utah who are trying to come up with plans on how to secretly transition kids. So we have a lot of, it's hard to not get emotional about this, because it seems so, I mean, it doesn't seem, it is so nefarious. And it seems like Utah's really targeted. I mean, we moved here from very, very liberal Seattle, thinking, oh, we're going to go to a place where we are safe, where we can just be a family. And instead, all I see are these policies that are just extremely, extremely divisive and extremely damaging. Why is it, do you think, that our school boards and state officials are buying into this?
From what I've observed, because I'm also an implant to Utah from California, moved about 10 years ago. I think our state likes to be the first to do things. They like being the ones that are the innovators. And so I've seen that with technology. I've seen that with all sorts of subjects, but they like to be the ones out front. You know, I think our state was one of the first to adopt Common Core standards. And raise our hand and be like, we'll try it out. But again, a lot of this stuff is experimental. We don't know what how it's going to affect our children later. And I think Utah specifically targeted. I mean, I think there's several reasons, some of which we won't get into, I think, but the main reason is the family unit, because of the religious culture here, is seen as very strong. And if, you know, not from our leaders' perspective, but the folks who are trying to pull this into our state and influence our leaders to bring it in, the family is a threat to what their plans are in indoctrinating the kids. If you can get, you know, to break up the family unit, you're going to be able to influence these kids much more than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Xi Van Fleet from China, and that was the whole goal, is to destroy family situations. It was interesting because some of the words that they would use would be like, if you were a property owner, if you were the children of property owners, they would tear you down. You couldn't be part of the red class, but you could be an ally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because they're using those words in the curriculum, and people still have their heads in the sand.
Oh, yes. And they'll even introduce terms. In my second step video, I talked about how in the K-5, they even introduce terminology that you would find specifically on allyship websites. Almost every time they do an SEL lesson, it's called this song called Walk in Your Shoes. Walk in their shoes, walk in their shoes. Another was recognizing your blind spots. And so it's like they're slowly trying to get them, again, to normalize this stuff. And you can see how even this influx of kids identifying as different genders, right? They don't want to identify as a white cisgender or anything, because that's seen as the oppressor class. And kind of going along with what you were talking about with Xi Van Fleet, right? Is that
She, like, she
Xi?
says my pronoun really is she.
I know.
She.
Xi Van Fleet.
Mhm.
You know, and how they were trying to create the Red Guard is that, you know, they made everything, the four olds, bad, right? So if you identified as anything in that category, you were seen as bad. And so these kids in school are like, well, how can I become a part of an oppressed class? And the easiest way for them to do that is to adopt one of these oppressed class norms.
Right. And also, and they are doing this now. Back then it was to turn your family in.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing some things that are like, is your family like this? Announce who in your family is a racist.
Right. Does your family affirm your gender?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if not, we're your new family.
Right.
So, and the thing is that they're teaching them about gender, because young children do not care. They don't care about gender. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I've got a little guy in one of my classes who, when I pull out the stickers, when I pull out the race cars, he's like, can I have one from your other pocket? The flowers and the unicorns.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure. Not a single kid bats an eye, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
you just keep on going, because you have no idea where that kid's life is going to take him. The goal, I mean, I think of good teachers, good educators, is to make every single child feel valued. Not every single child's choices feel valued, but every single child, just because they're an individual, should be valued. And it seems to me that SEL is pushing people into collectives. Am I correct on that?
Oh yeah, into collectives, into affinity groups. They're just trying to have people see all the differences. And I don't think you build unity that way. I think you just see each other as the human race. You treat each other with kindness, regardless of what your life choices are. But kindness doesn't mean affirming everything that they believe.
One of the things that I found extremely interesting about Utah is that whether or not you are Black or white, conservative or liberal, a lot of people that fit into all of those groups are actually pro segregation. And that has been a really shocking thing to find out, um, because I thought that we were well past those moments. But I was speaking to a Black conservative, and she said, well, I believe we're the only people who can help our people. Um, and I just thought, I don't see us as our people. Like, if there's a child in my class who needs help, I'm going to help them, no matter if their name is Harvey or their name is Dontel, right? Like, I'm going to help whoever needs the help. And I'm not going to put on, oh, it's because they're Black, because this Black child might be the child of a doctor, and this white child might be the child of a single mom who's fighting addiction.
Right.
To label people in these groups is extremely, it's just abusive. And that goes right along with the anti-racist, which primarily is a leftist thing, except for here, where a governor completely embraces it.
Mm-hmm.
um, that that teaches that we have to be partisan, that we have to be in these different groups. Robin DiAngelo actually said, I have no answers for biracial families, which is, and I think that that's really where this comes, because it's true. Utah does have a culture, it does have a history that is racist, but people have worked so hard to get over that. And kids are not, for the most part. I mean, maybe if you live in the backwoods and some tiny small town that I've never even heard of, maybe. But for the most part, kids are not that way until they're taught to be. And it
Right.
seems like everyone's on board with teaching them to be.
Yeah, I don't understand it. And just to clarify with your audience who don't know, I mean, when they say anti-racist, they don't mean it's not enough to just not be racist. You actually have to be an advocate for dismantling the system that they believe is set up to oppress people of color.
And what is the system? What are the parts of the system?
Judicial, education. I mean, literally every system that's set up in society, they feel housing, and not to say that there hasn't been times in our history that that has been the case, but I believe, and this is why it's different, right? Why they believe people are systemically racist and America's founded on racial oppression, is that they believe it's still set up that way, regardless of any kind of strives that we've made in making things equal and not racist. And so they believe it still is that way. You have to dismantle the system, break it up, create this new system. But unfortunately, the system that they're now creating is now reverse racist, right? Everything's racist toward white people, or European people, or anybody that they declare has an iota of whiteness, which is not just the color of your skin anymore.
It's any kind of power,
Right.
So I think people get into a lot of trouble when they say that it's an anti-white movement. And I believe what it is it's a pro-othering movement, and it's also a pro tribalist movement. They want us broken up into every single tribe by every point of intersectionality.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about where this is coming from, but can you give me, I mean, I just want to bombard people, honestly. Like, I just want to bombard them with, these are the facts. This is where it is. This is where you can find the issues. I know they can find it by following you on your channel. Also following you on Twitter at Lisa Logan. Is that
It's
correct? What is it?
at I am Lisa Logan.
At I am Lisa Logan. But I just really want to just give people so much that they cannot turn around and say it's not here anymore.
Oh yes, I think, and I honestly, we've gotten to a point where just kind of feeding people little things here and there isn't waking up people enough. I think people need to understand and be shocked about where they're going with this.
Right.
And this is honestly what made me drop everything I was doing in my life, and have literally been laser focused on this subject for the last 9 months and exposing it and getting it into the national news, because it needs to be talked about. Where they are going with this is a social credit system. And if your viewers don't know, it's already happening in the business world. They're called environmental, social, and corporate governance scores. And whether or not people invest in businesses depends on this ESG score. And the S stands for social justice. So businesses are scored, and then people decide if they want to do business with them. And what's happening now with SEL is they're literally, through companies like Panorama that we've adopted here in our state, which is an assessment system, they're quantifying these skills, which seems impossible, right? Subjective skills. How do you quantify empathy or self-management? How do you really quantify it? Then they're measuring them, creating a score that goes on their report card, right? Their back-end system. This information goes into our statewide longitudinal data system. Then the problem is, we have people like the Gates-funded company Data Quality Campaign and Jeb Bush's Chiefs for Change petitioning Congress to lift this ban on creating a basic nationwide student record where they link workforce data to student data. And so what happens is, when your SEL score, and this is actually happening now with ESGs, they're talking about in the literature having companies hire on emotional intelligence, or these soft skills that they're now measuring.
And emotional intelligence, just a second, but the emotional intelligence, this is not, would you help your neighbor if they were in need, or would you stop and to help someone? This is, do you believe exactly the way that we have taught you how to believe? This is conditioning our children. I would go as far as to say that it's brainwashing our children.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate description. So the problem is, when these companies hire on inclusivity, and their social emotional score being the main thing that they hire on, will our children, maybe who don't believe that they're more than two genders, or don't buy into this critical race theory narrative that the whole system is racist and oppressive, will their score then go down? And will that prevent them from getting into a college, getting a good job, getting a loan? I mean, we see this already happening in China.
How will they even go into college? How will they even go into college if their grades don't matter? I mean,
well, they're going to have to write an essay on what their views are on inclusivity, right? Like,
and how do they write an essay?
Social justice.
How do they write an essay if school is very much focused on social justice? Then how do they know how to write a sentence? How do they know how to critically think and to have arguments that go both ways?
Yeah, how are they going to, right? I mean, they're dumbing down our society. And really, all this is also going along with the personalized competency-based learning we were talking about earlier, and away from the grading, where they're going to be having education all digital, right? They're going to have these competencies they have to check off. The computer is going to know exactly what competencies they still need to have, and it'll be like a playlist education. And is this where we want education to go, right? Where our kids are not getting as much social time. They're not in front of a teacher or with other students. They're honed in on what's going on the computer, and the computer's reading them and providing them with the education they believe they need to have. Is this where we want to go in society? I don't think that's what we want to do.
Yeah, but yeah, in our district, they recently said that they're looking forward to more AI implemented in our schools.
Which is why they need the soft skills, right? Because they believe that in the future, these jobs that they believe they're educating kids for are not going to exist.
Right. So what happens to our kids then?
Right. And that's why it has to be about the kids. That's why people have to be shocked into action. This is about our kids' future, and it doesn't look so bright right now.
Right. Okay, so what can we do?
First, opt your kids out. Opt your kids out of this data collection and all of this going on, and just get involved. And it starts just going to school board meetings, figure out what's going on, make public comments, and really appeal to the middle here, just like I'm doing here. This is about again our kids' future, and then also what falls in the school's lane and what falls in the parents' lane. No matter what your political affiliation is, we should all agree that parents have the right to instill what they believe are the best values, attitudes, and beliefs for their child, no matter who it is. I mean, like, an atheist wouldn't want their kid going to school and learning about God, right? It's taking over the parents' role. And if we fight it from that angle, I think if we build bridges with people who can see that this is not healthy for our kids or our society, I think that's how we move forward and really advocate for your child's data privacy and your family's data privacy. And I think this is the next frontier of fighting, right? Where we're saying like our data should not belong to these third-party vendors that the school is using in the Chromebooks. We really should be having people, we should have oversight over those processes and not just laws that say, oh, no, you can't do this, but then there's no teeth at all.
What's upsetting is that those equity gods, which is what I like to call them, the Zuckerberg, Chan,
Mm-hmm.
the Gates, they're never going to be equitable with the rest of us. So why are they pushing this so heavy that our children are not supposed to be able to compete? Because that's what they're doing. They're making it so that our children cannot compete. They say that they're doing this for the marginalized. Are you kidding me? This keeps the marginalized in their box. This does not allow them to break out of it.
Yeah, they're using the marginalized to forward their agenda.
Which is what always happens before things get taken over. Yeah. Always. And then those people are lined up and oftentimes shot, oftentimes put in prison, but they're definitely considered the useless class. And so I don't see how that's going to change. I don't see how anyone can trust these groups that say that they want equity and equal outcomes for all when, and I say this a lot, but when those people choose, when they live like kings.
It's about power and control, really. And what their real agenda is, which really stems down, if you want to follow the money, it goes all the way back to the UN and the Sustainable Development Goals. It's funny, people fought me a long time on this subject, but I had found video of them saying they're going to use social emotional learning to advance the Sustainable Development Goals. I found a whole paper from the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization that literally said social emotional learning. And then it talked about how they're going to use SEL to manipulate our kids' minds to create cognitive dissonance. And they co-opted E equals MC squared to do it. It's pretty fantastic. It was like a picture of Einstein, like critical thought, critical theory being inserted into their minds, because man, these kids are going to have cognitive dissonance when they realize that the stuff that they learn at home doesn't comport with what they're learning at school. And how are we going to handle that? It's going to cause all sorts of mental instability. Because really, at the end of the day, you see these with these smart cities kind of popping up or whatever, Gates buying up all the farmland. What they want to do is, they're really worried about our world. I think we should take care of the earth that we've inherited, but
stewards. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good stewards of the earth. But what they're trying to do is force people into these sustainable cities, and how do you even with the school movement to push kids online, well, maybe they'll eventually be able to do away with school buildings, right, and the maintenance on school buildings, and everything has to do with sustainability and their environmental
but
agenda.
It's sustaining their palaces. That's the big issue. Is it's like it's not like you're gonna come down. I've heard that Elon Musk has a small home. That's what I've heard. I don't know if that's true, but they're not going to do that. These people who are pushing it, these people who push the racial agenda, it is so frustrating to listen to people who are profiting, who are truly profiting. I saw on Cassell, there was a thing that said how to sell SEL to parents. And I say, you are selling our kids. Anybody who embraces this is selling our kids.
They are.
The solution to our children not wanting to kill themselves is making sure that they feel of value, making sure that we as parents aren't glued to our things like this, right? Making sure that our kids don't just come home and grab a tablet, making sure that our 2-year-olds aren't, I'm sorry, but not sorry, making sure that our 2-year-olds aren't getting pushed around in the grocery cart with this in their face so that it's so natural. Because there is a goal, and the goal is not good. It does not have a good outcome.
Oh, it dehumanizes our society and our kids, and that's the sad part. It's like that's why social media is such a horrible thing, and that's why I tell my kids a lot. We get in the car, and I'm like, you don't need your tablet or your phone right now. Like, I'm actually here. I want to talk to you. I want to find out how your day went. I want to find out, like.
Yes.
because we have a 5-minute trip to the grocery store, you don't need to take your device with you. Like,
Right.
let's, it's
Yeah.
pull away from that. And you're absolutely right about that,
And I
Carrie.
think it's really hard, especially when we are mama warriors, and we do get so caught up in this and we convince ourselves, even in our positions, we convince ourselves that um, what we're doing for the greater good. And if anybody's working for the greater good, it's probably us. I mean, at least we're trying to, right? But at the same time, we have to remember our families. People move to Utah because they want family values. And they're going to teach them in schools why the patriarchy is bad, why Christianity is oppressive to minorities. They aren't going to talk about why Islam is oppressive. They're not going to talk about Buddhism. In fact, they're going to bring it in and have the kids do yoga, right? But they're not going to address that Christianity has made people learn to love their neighbor. I mean, that's literally what it's been about. And instead, they're going to teach that it is a system of oppression. And in terms of, there's so much money to be made, and that's really, I think, where it comes down to. I look at our governor, who supposedly has conservative values, and his wife is one of the biggest champions of SEL.
Yep. And she has Tim Schreiber, who was on the board of Castle on her advisory board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I did not
In
know
fact,
that.
he's coming here to speak. I believe it's in the next few weeks or so. Yes, and it's interesting. I did meet with our governor's wife, and I showed her all the nasty stuff I had found in Second Step and the agenda that was coming through, which is truly Marxist. And she looked at me with a straight face and she said, well, my definition of social emotionally isn't your definition. And I said, well, it's not my definition. It's Castle's and the Second Step's definition. And then she went on to tell me how her initiative was to build emotional intelligence to serve the needs of the future workforce. So I believe she knows what she's doing.
Yeah, that's the other part that's really painful about that is her other platform is foster care.
Mm-hmm.
And
ACEs, yeah.
Nothing really damages our kids more than the ACEs.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing.
Right.
ACEs teaches you that if you are a victim, if you have had this much victim status, that you are permanently in that position. And there's very little that you can do to get out of it. Like nothing. You will always have these behind you. And so kids are going to go to school and they're going to be, instead of being taught that they can be anything they want if they apply themselves, it's going to be, why are you oppressed? What's wrong with you? Why are you not happy? And how can we, as your school, support you?
Right.
Not how can your family?
I appreciate your voice on that, because I know you did go through the foster system and have experience with those ACEs, and I love that you're out there talking about, your ACEs score isn't your destiny.
Right.
And really, that's the sad part about this whole oppression narrative. It's like they're teaching kids that the world is against them and there's no way they're going to overcome that. And if you're a kid and you hear that, like, why are you going to try? And that's the thing. It's harming those kids who are taught that, because then they never try to achieve the best that they can be. And it's just so sad that they're using that and harming the people they say that they're out there trying to support.
I recently heard that the biggest group of transitioning kids is the foster system.
Wow.
Because they want to be seen. They want to be seen, and this plays right into that. I don't have any other words than it's vile. It's vile. So, parents of patriots.
Yes.
What does that mean?
The whole goal of my channel and my eventual website, it's up and running, I just need to get it going, is that I want to teach parents how to be parents of patriots. And it kind of talked about what you were just mentioning. At the end of every talk that I do, and I get invited to do a lot of podcasts and speeches, I always say, people are like, what are you going to do? And I think you killed it with that comment. Parents, sit down with your kids at the dinner table and teach them about this stuff, because they're going to learn about it in school. But the lens they're going to be given in school is not going to provide them both sides and the ability to kind of critically think through a lot of these things. Our kids knew early on what a free market capitalist system was and why that's beneficial, and why communism, there's more government control, and look, it's been tried many times throughout society and hasn't worked, and it's killed
People
lots
have
of
had to
people.
die. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so if you're able to provide that, like, don't be afraid to talk to your kids about deep subjects like that, and have them think critically in a space where they're safe, they can ask questions. Because again, we're getting into this whole thing where they're trying to kind of paint parents as like other generations that don't know anything. In fact, in the beginning video of Second Step, they pretty much literally say that. They don't know what you're going through. You live in a different time. And they showed like a BLM march and a candlelight vigil. And yes, we as a society, like, we've gone through different, like, I went through different things than my kids did, that my kids do. Um, yeah, they'd have to live, they've had to live through COVID, but so have I. And we all can find common ground and be able to say, look, what do we want our society to look like? Why is America such an amazing place and is able to foster freedom and equality? What did the founding fathers have in mind? And teach them these things so they learn to appreciate that they don't live in somewhere like China, right, where people are being locked inside buildings because people have COVID. I mean, we don't want that. We don't want that in society. And we need to foster that love of
Well,
patriotism.
and the times that they live in, sadly, are manufactured. I'm just going to be blunt. We
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to live through a summer of riots.
No, we
We
didn't.
didn't have to live through burning down of buildings. We didn't have to live through BLM. None of it needed to happen. There could have been another way to talk about race. And definitely George Floyd shouldn't have been the hero of it. So, yeah, that's super upsetting to me that all of this empathy is for a man who was a criminal. And did he deserve what happened to him in the way it happened? No, but it's happened to so many people, and even of different colors, including white men.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they've turned it and they manipulated the situation. And if you don't think that they're going to manipulate our children, look how they manipulated the rest of us for 2 years. Now they want to take that on our 5-year-olds and do the same thing. So
Disgusting.
it is time to stand. I have talked to so many people who have said, oh, I just choose to believe in goodwill. I just choose to believe that everyone has good intentions. I've had teachers say, why can't you just trust that our intentions are good? I can't trust because there's too much evidence to the contrary. Do I believe that there are amazing teachers out there? Absolutely. Do I support those teachers? Absolutely. Do I want those teachers to join our cause? Absolutely. But do I know that there are activists out there here in Utah, locally in Nebo, locally in Murray, locally for sure in Davis County and Salt Lake counties? Absolutely.
Yep.
Don't hide it.
No, and they don't. It's all over TikTok. It's all over social media. It's all over. There's videos of people having. I mean, that's why that teacher in Lehigh made national news.
Yeah.
Because what she was saying was like, don't listen to your parents.
Yeah.
Be an activist.
And you think she's the only one? She also said the district isn't going to care what I say.
Yeah.
That's what she said. And if she had that much confidence, then you need to think about your district.
Absolutely. And really where they're learning all this stuff is the teachers' colleges.
Right.
I mean, they're having them buy into this stuff in order to get their certification.
Well, and then their teacher trainings afterwards.
Right. All the professional development. It's all leaning towards this. And this is why so many of our good teachers who don't agree with this activism in the classroom have quit.
Which is a hard thing. You want to say, yes, good for you for quitting. And you want to say, who's going to protect our kids now?
Yeah.
So there has to be a plan. And I think the first thing that would wake up people is if when they go back to school in August, classrooms are empty. If classrooms are empty, or there's very few kids in those classes, that is the only thing that's going to make our local school boards take notice. They're going to freak out and they're going to say, oh, it's anti-hate. And that's the other thing. Just like, just like people in Brexit say, you have to stop caring what they think about you because it's your children. We always say, I would do anything for my children, but we won't stand up and protect them from what is, quite frankly, we have two competing agendas. We have uber capitalism for the very, very rich to stay in that position and to never be challenged. They call themselves the elite. How arrogant can you be to call yourself the elite? And then those same people are pushing all of the programs to push our people down.
Yeah.
This is what happens and I know socialists who are like, this isn't socialism. Socialism was a whole lot happier, if you lived in Norway or something, than what we're heading towards. And I know a teacher who came from Norway, who has said, no, what we're heading to is communism. What we're heading to is the only people who you can speak to are the people who look like you or who think like you. And what we're heading is trying to make sure that every single child thinks exactly the same.
Yep. To globalized citizenship education. That's what the UN wants.
Yeah. Well, I have so appreciated speaking with you. Is there anything else that you want to say before we close?
No, I think thank you for this conversation. Thank you for educating parents and just getting the word out, because it really is, I think, what you said earlier about the other thing I hear most from parents is thank you so much for being out there fighting for our kids. And while I appreciate their kind words, I need to say, I need your help. Get out here, help me. There are only a few of us really doing the work out here, and we're spread thin. We need more people on the front lines fighting. So get involved, parents.
Yeah. And how can they, what resources would you suggest that they look into to get involved?
I think just study what's in your schools, right? Figure out what exactly they're teaching. Go to those websites of the people, look up what is their stance on systemic racism. The different companies that your school district has brought in, ask questions, just be curious. And follow people like James Lindsay, follow people like Martin's daughter, just go out there. And once you follow one person, you figure out who else to follow.
Right. Right. We oftentimes share. I
Yes.
share at the end of my thing, people worth following.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you so much, and just having the opportunity to get to know you over the last year.
Same.
Thank you for standing up. All right, parents, let's get out there, get involved. You have to take your heads out of the sand. I'm going to share as many resources as I can in this link, and especially the link to Lisa's channel. All I can say, I guess I just need to finish with Godspeed, because what they say, all that is necessary for evil to flourish is for good men and women to do nothing.
For sure.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.